Welcome from NASCAP. Lauren and I are here at the NASCAP conference, and we're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk about the census. Please do ask us questions. We definitely want to know if we're not making sense or if you have a follow-up. But I think I'm just going to dive right into it. Here we go. If I can get it to work. No, I did try this earlier. Hold on just a second. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about what the census is and why it matters. We're going to talk about what is happening across the country for getting out the count. And then we're going to talk about how we can get our agencies involved and how you can participate in this process. The biggest thing, if you've been through one of our presentations before that we're talking about today, is the messaging that works with different populations. So a lot of our partners have done some focus group research about how to contact different hard to count populations. So we're going to talk about that information today, and then we're going to talk about next steps, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Having trouble sharing the PowerPoint. Give me just a second. There, good. Okay. We will be posting this webinar online. So if you want to pull this down, the slides, you can do this with your own team. And normally I would ask in a room, what do you already know about the census, to kind of gauge the room and see where people are and find out what people are already doing for census engagement. And what people are worried about. I'm worried about all of it, but my job is to worry about all of it. So that's what this slide is for. Might be on a timer. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties aplenty today. We're going to talk about what the census is. So the census is actually codified in the Constitution. It is Article 1, Section 2, so it's pretty up near the top. It's one of the more important things that our founding fathers did when they were framing our democracy. They put in this requirement that we count all people who live in the United States every 10 years because they wanted a fair and just way to make sure that we allocated resources appropriately and that we allocated war debt at the time. So they figured out this process by which we count all people who live in the United States every 10 years. So we have been doing this since 1790. Once we count up all the people in the country, we divide that number by 435 to determine how many people belong in each congressional district across the country. There are some states that automatically get one congressional seat, places with lower populations but are still a state, like Delaware, Vermont, North Dakota. They have smaller populations, but because they are a state, the founding fathers gave them a single representative, and then the rest of the representatives are divvied up across the country based on population. This year, we're looking at lots of different shifts in how our political representation happens. We have several states in New England and across the northern Canadian border that are possibly losing a congressional seat. New York, Minnesota, Michigan maybe, Illinois for sure, Massachusetts, lots of places up there. Populations have been either not growing as rapidly as they have in years past, or it's just that populations in other part of the country have been growing faster. Colorado, Idaho both stand to gain an extra seat. California might gain another seat. Florida and New Mexico, Louisiana, Texas all stand to gain a seat, maybe two, maybe three in some cases, as well as North Carolina, because those populations are booming. And part of that is migration, part of that is immigration. Lots of people have been moving west. So Boise, Idaho is growing as a huge urban hub. Lots of people have been moving there. Denver, Colorado has had a lot of people move there in the past 10 years. North Carolina has become a hotbed of baby boomer retirement. but lots of families have also been moving there from places that are otherwise overcrowded, or people just don't like the traffic, or they want a milder winter. Lots of reasons to move. And then you have migration across the border. So down by Texas, Texas and New Mexico, Florida, we're finding more and more immigrants there. But this is a federally mandated process. That's why we do this. And it's not just about political representation. The census is also used to apportion federal funding. So the programs that we provide at our agencies, LIHEAP, SNAP and WIC benefits, Section 8 housing vouchers, a lot of the programs that we run have their roots in census numbers when figuring out the formulas for the federal block grants to states. I can figure it, there it goes. Sorry, now I've figured it out. So there's been a lot of question about the questions. So these are the only 10 questions that will be on the census form. Age in years, month, day, they're gonna ask for that, and they're gonna ask for, they ask for age and they ask for date of birth. They ask about Hispanic origin and they ask about race. Race is different this cycle. It's not just checking one box. You can also fill out an other. And that's to a nod to people who have more than one ethnicity. So you can put more than one thing down. They're going to ask how each person on the form is related to the first person, because the first person in the form should be the person filling out the form. They are going to ask gender. They're going to ask if you own or rent, and if it's a house or an apartment or a mobile home. And then they're going to ask some operational questions around April 1st. April 1st is Census Day, so it's the day that whenever you fill out the form, you fill it out as if it were April 1st. And that's to prevent overcounts of people who moved. So if you fill out the form on March 12th, but then you move into a new house on April 5th and you have a form in the mailbox because the mail hasn't been collected for a couple of months, you don't get recounted. You think about who lived in your house on April 1st, and that's who you put on your form no matter when you fill the form out. So these operational questions are trying to find undercounted populations. They want to find the teenager who's your son's best friend, who gets kicked out of his house, has been staying with you. You might not think that that kid should be counted, but if they're living with you, then they should be. Or it's the grandmother taking care of the grandchild, and the grandmother thinks that mom or dad will fill out a census form with their child, but she lives with the grandmother, and so the grandmother should put her on her form. It is always better to overcount than undercount. It is always better to err on the side of caution and to have mom and grandma both put the child down on their separate census forms, and for neither of them to put that child down. So you should always err on the side of caution. They also want a telephone number and the name of the person filling out the census because they want to make sure that they can reach you if they have questions. There. So I've already talked about apportionment. That's what census data is used for. I haven't talked about redistricting. So once we change all of the states and reallocate all of their congressional members based on population, we might need to redraw some boundaries. Let's say Idaho adds another congressperson. We then need to carve up these original congressional seats to make sure that there's now a new district. So redistricting happens on the federal level for the House of Representatives in Congress, but it also happens for state senators and for state representatives. It happens in school districts. I live in a relatively new neighborhood that didn't exist in 2010. And so they might find that we need to redraw our school district boundaries because our neighborhood has a lot of children. So it might be that we overflow another district what we'd otherwise fall into, and we need to create a new school district. Voting precincts are also redrawn based on population. We've talked a little bit about distributing federal dollars to states. That is definitely something we use census data for. We use census data to inform government planning, decisions on federal, tribal, state, and local levels. That's where do we put the next firehouse? Where do we put the next hospital? How do we zone this neighborhood? Is it a residential area? Should it be a commercial area? Those sorts of decisions. Organizational decisions. We have a lot of kids in my neighborhood. Maybe we have enough kids to sustain not one gelato store, but also an ice cream store. Businesses look at census data to see where the population is in order for them to determine whether their business has a good chance of survival in that area. Census data is also used to enforce voting rights and civil rights legislation. That's why they ask Hispanic origin questions and they ask the race question to make sure that the resources we allocate towards those programs are accurately dispersed across the country. The one thing that's not on here that we use census data for as community action is for our community needs assessment. So every 3 years, we use census numbers in order to create the programs that we're going to put into effect in our agencies. So if we have incorrect census data for that, then we will be using the wrong numbers to plan the next 3 years of our agency. So the key dates. Today is just 15 days until the census drops in the mail. So it started off, we kicked off the census in January on the 21st in remote Alaska, because that's where the native tribes gather in the winter when it's super cold, and they come to town for the winter when it's not plausible to be out hunting, and they stay for a couple of months. And January is when the pathways are frozen over, so you can actually access some of these places. But for the rest of America, we start in March. March 12th, invitations will start going out to households all across America. Every household will receive some sort of a written invitation. So between March 12th and March 18th is really when you're going to start to see those in the mailboxes. And this year, they're sending invitations to respond online. Previous years, it's been a paper form sent out initially with a hotline where you could call and ask questions. This year, the invitation gives you an online code, and you go to www.mycensus.gov. Is that correct? Lauren will correct me if I'm wrong in the chat box. And you can fill out your census form online by putting in that online code. If you don't have that code, you can also go online starting on March 12th, and you can put in your address, and they will match it to your code in order to mark your household as completed. The other new thing this year is that instead of just answering questions on the hotline, you can also fill the census form out over the phones this year. And they have those phone lines in 13 different languages. So that's going to all happen in March. If you don't respond in the first couple of weeks, you'll get a reminder letter and a postcard. In April, early April, reminder letters will be sent with paper questionnaires for the first time. They did this to cut down on the printing that they had to do to save a little bit of postage money, and because it's easier for collection purposes and to process the data to have things be electronic. Final postcards will be sent at the end of April, and if you have not responded to the census by April 27th, you are very likely to have somebody knocking on your door starting March 4th. May 4th. May 4th through July is the non-response follow-up visit period, and that is when they will have Census Bureau enumerators knocking on doors for people who have not responded yet, and either asking them to go online and fill out the form, or to ask them in person just right then and there. They'll fill out the form with them from their doorstep. Census Day is highlighted here because, again, it's when we do that snapshot of America. So if you fill out that form on March 12th, then you think about who will be living with you on April 1st. So if your mother-in-law is going to move in with you on March 25th, and you know that on March 12th, then you would put her down as a household member because she would be living with you on April 1st. Just one way that we make sure that we count everyone in the right place at the right time. 95% of households will receive their census invitation by mail. If you have a very rural district, a lot of your census invitations will be received when a Census Bureau employee physically drops it off at your house. 1% of households will be counted in person, and those are homeless populations. That includes the community up in Alaska, the rural Alaskan village, where they don't have mail, but the census enumerators just went up to Tooksuk Bay and went door to door because it was a small enough village that they could do that, and there was no other feasible way to do it. They are estimating that 40% of households will require in-person follow-up, which is a huge number. And this year, we're also anticipating lots and lots of undercounts all across the country. So how will you get your ballot? There are some people who might get a paper form early. They've done some studies and some sample tests, and they know that certain populations prefer paper forms over the online or phone options. This PowerPoint, which will be sent out to everybody, has the CUNY map linked there. You can go to the CUNY map. It's the City University of New York, and you can check out your area. You can drill down to census tract. You can put in your zip code, and you will get a map of how you will receive your census, whether it's going to be through the mail, whether it'll be in English and Spanish through the mail, if it'll be a paper form, if it'll be an online code, or if your census form will be dropped off by a Census Bureau employee. These maps also show you why certain populations are harder to count than others. It also shows where the hardest to count populations in the United States live and are concentrated. So you can take a look at that and see where people in your neighborhood or in your community and your county might be harder to count than others and why that might be. There might be a language barrier, there might be little to no internet access, especially in those rural areas, lots of different reasons, which might help you figure out how to reach those folks. If somebody doesn't get an invitation, that does not mean they should not fill out the form. In fact, we're counting on community action to touch base with all of our customers to make sure that they know to look for these forms. And if they don't get an invitation in the mail for some reason, either they were a missed household or a forgotten household, a new house that wasn't in the master database file, that people can still know that they need to go online and fill that form out. And so we're hoping that you can help us get that word out. To do all of this is really expensive. We're talking about knocking the doors of 40% of America. The Census Bureau hires hundreds of thousands of people. I think the number is 520,000, and they're going to spend $15 billion by the time all is said and done. They spent a lot of that money already because they've been planning for this census since 2011 when the last census wrapped up. But half of that money will be spent this year alone. The average cost for counting a household has risen dramatically. In 1970, it was $16, and today it's $107. And both of those figures are in 2020 dollars. So it's gotten really, really, really expensive. But it's also really important. For every person counted in your community, it's equal to $2,000 in federal funding coming back into your community. So if you miss 10 people, you missed $20,000 that first year. But the census is not just 1 year, it's for 10 years because we won't do the next one until 2030, which means that you're really missing out on $200,000 in funding from the federal government for highway transportation, child care programs, public education, and then all of the programs that we provide for our customers, Head Start programs, SNAP and benefits, all of those things come into play with this. So why is it so difficult? What's going on here? First of all, we have a very mobile population. The statistics is that 14 to 18% of Americans move every year. In community action, our people are more likely to move multiple times a year if they move, and 30% of that population moves every year, which makes sense. If you lose a job and you get evicted from your house, you might stay with a friend for a couple of weeks, but you don't want to wear out your welcome. So you spend some time with your parents for a few weeks, and then you end up in a motel for a little bit. It might take a little while for you to get back on your feet and to get a new apartment. So you could be mobile for quite some time. The constrained fiscal environment is there's the fight in Congress about how exactly to fund the census. They think they've figured some of that out, but not all of it. And we think that for a variety of reasons, the Census Bureau is going to need additional funding, and there's a big question over whether or not they will get it. The rapidly changing use of technology. Everybody carries a smartphone, little computer in your hand, but it dings and it buzzes and it beeps. You have Snapchat and you have Twitter, you have Facebook, you have text messages, you have emails, you have news alerts. All of that is difficult to break through, which is part of the information explosion. But the rapidly changing use of technology is also problematic this year. Being online this year with the census is an opportunity, but there's also an opportunity for there to be problems with that. If anyone remembers Amazon Prime Day and what happened a couple of years ago when everybody went online at the same time to the same site to do something. We also have an increasingly diverse population in this country. We are a melting pot and we have immigrants from all over the world. And many of them have never heard of a census before, and they certainly wouldn't fill out basic demographic questions for their previous government. So why would they do it for the American government? Which also ties into distrust. Especially in today's political climate, there is a lot of distrust. The one thing I failed to mention when I talked about what was on the census, which is what is not on the census. There will be no one asking Social Security numbers. There's nowhere where you will be asked for a bank account number. No one will be asked for a political contribution or for money, and no one will be asked about their citizenship status. All of those things are pretty important because those are all things that should be red flags if you get a phone call from somebody saying that they're from the Census Bureau. A, the Census Bureau does not make phone calls. B, they don't ask those questions. So if you get a phone call that says, I'm calling from the Census Bureau to fill out your census, you should hang up because it's a scam. But that's part of the information explosion and rapidly changing use of technology, that people are going to be scamming like that, and we have to watch out for misinformation out there. There are also lots of informal complex living arrangements, and this is how kids 0 to 4 are the most commonly undercounted population in the country. People don't put their kids on forms, or they don't put the children living in their house on a form if they're not their child. Foster children should be counted. People who are temporarily living with a relative should be counted. People who are couch surfing need to be counted. So these informal complex living arrangements across the country make that a little bit harder to suss out and figure out how the proper way to do it is. The Census Bureau has identified these populations as being the hardest to count in the country. These are the populations that are most likely to be undercounted. And if you look through it, it's a veritable who of community action. These are the people that we serve on a daily basis, and they are the most likely ones to be left out. This is because they can be one or all of these 4 things: hard to persuade, interview, contact, or locate. You can have people who don't want to be found. You can have people who have language barriers. They don't speak one of the 13 languages that will be on the phone, or they're low literacy, so they can't read one of the 59 language guides that the Census Bureau has in different languages on their website. So lots of reasons why people could be one of these things, but many of our clients and customers are more than one, or even all 4. We are asking, and even at this late date, we are asking that we help the Census Bureau hire the 500,000 plus people that we need to be hitting doors in the streets. Our most recent newsletter has a blog post, and I believe that the URL is Community Action Partnership /2020-census.com blog. Lauren's going to put it in the chat box because I don't remember it quite. But we have a blog post up about the process for hiring because people have been going online to apply, but then they don't know the process. So if you miss one of the 3 phone calls where they call to give you a phone interview to offer you the position, you go into the bottom of the pile again. So that process is really, it's good to know what to expect. They have wages between $13 and $27 across the country. They also have 58 cents a mile, and they have flexible and full-time jobs. So if you are a community action frontline office worker and you want to do census work on the weekends, please sign up. The season is March and through July. And many places, 40 states are up. I think we're up to 40 states have waivers. So if you have a retired grandfather who would love to be involved but doesn't want to lose his benefits that he gets through your agency, check the waivers. Common Cause has a list, and Lauren might be able to find it while we're chatting, or we can send it out afterwards to see if your state is one of those waiver states where it won't affect benefits. LIHEAP is included in that as well. The reason we're asking you to do this is, first of all, I'm really worried that we're not going to be able to hire enough people to do the follow-ups that we need for that 40% of America. But it makes more sense for them to hire locally. You don't want somebody from New York or Boston to go down to Texas. The accent would be wrong, the colloquialisms, the speech patterns. You want people who look and act and are part of a community to be doing this work because they're more trusted than somebody from an outsider culture would be. This slide also has a link to those pay rates and where the jobs are and to how to do some of this work. All right, so trying to watch time, but why are we doing this? Why did the National Partnership hire me to talk to folks about the census? We've touched on this a little bit, but the hardest to count are the ones that are the least likely to fill out the census form. Okay. These people come to us and ask us for help. They ask us for help, we help them, and so we become trusted messengers for this community. So if we tell them that the census is safe, easy, and really important for their community, they will be more likely to participate, which is what we really need. And the more we can do that, the more likely our communities are to have their fair share of representation and their fair share of dollars from the federal government. Just a quick slide to talk about a little bit of those programs that I've mentioned. Some of them, Head Start, LIHEAP, WIOA activities, obviously CSBG, which I know touches all of us. All of these programs are somewhere in their formulas based in census numbers. All right, so we have a problem, right? We have a bunch of people who don't want to be counted. They don't want to be part of the census and participate. So what are we doing about it? We have partnered as the National Partnership with the Census Bureau, and we encourage all of you to do the same. The slides that we'll send out will have individual contact information for Census Bureau locations. It's one of the next slides. We have chosen to partner with them because we know that if we work together, we can find a way to help make inroads into these communities. You can go to the website, you can sign up for their emails. If you're a data nerd like I am, you might really enjoy the facts and figures, but it also might help you talk about what the census is and how it impacts America, because they send out fun factoids. Oh, I find them fun because I am definitely a nerd. We also are asking, here it is, the slide, for you to reach out to your local regional office founder, well, local office. And when I say local, I don't really mean local, but the slides we'll send out will have contact information for people in Los Angeles, people in Denver, Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and New York. These are the 6 Census Bureau regions, and if you reach out to them and say, who is my partnership specialist, they will direct you to someone who's working locally for you. And that does a couple things for us. First of all, letting them know that you're there and that you would love for them to come in and do a staff training or some kind of a staff presentation, or bring brochures, or if they have stress balls or water bottles or some kind of a giveaway that they can bring into your office. If they can, that would be really helpful. But they also have a mobile, what is it, MQA, Mobile Questionnaire Assistance Program this year, where they have vans going around the country, and they're going to be monitoring the census returns in real time. And so if they see that your area is having a really low response, they might send one of the MQA vans to your area to try to boost response rates. And if you know that there's going to be a big Cinco de Mayo blowout party in the Hispanic neighborhood of your community, you can tell the partnership specialist about that and request that one of those vans come to work the crowd and help people come up to the van and fill out their census forms while they're at the festival. And so we're asking that you reach out to figure out who your partnership specialist is, so you can make those requests and kind of help move the resources to where we need them to be throughout the census process. And they're also pretty good at answering questions, and whenever I don't know the answer, they're the folks that I ask. They will also help with a complete count committee. The link at the bottom of this slide goes to the census website, where they have thousands of complete count committees listed. A complete count committee, it's a little bit like a tripartite board in some ways for the census. It brings together local community partners to push census participation throughout their community. In a small town, it could be the mayor and a couple of nonprofits and the local grocery store. Maybe it's the local clergy and the local religious affiliations. But they come together and they talk about how they're going to go about getting the word out that the census is really important for their community. Different places have because every place is a different size and different configuration. They're all different, just like community action agencies. Most states have a statewide complete count committee, and then a lot of locations, smaller locales, counties or towns, or the city of Phoenix has one. They have their own complete count committee for the city. We encourage you to take a look at this list and figure out who and where the local complete count committee is closest to you. And you can reach out to them and say, hey, we're here, we want to help out with the census. Keep us in mind, because there might be something that you can do to help them with their efforts. We are also part of something called the Census Counts Coalition. They have a website, censuscounts.org, where they have resources and toolkits. We have our own as well, but there's lots of interesting stuff and good information on that website. And you can take a pledge to be counted there and get email reminders about activities and things that are going on with the census world. These are a few of the partners. So it is a smattering of pretty much everyone in America. Different ethnic groups, different partnerships like the Coalition on Human Needs and Partnership for America's Children, the National Urban League and Color of Change, NALEO, which is the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, Faith and Public Life, Arab Americans, Asian Americans, disability folks. They tried to build a really broad coalition of nonprofits that would reach into every facet of that hard-to-count population. All right, talked about this a little bit. The partnership specialists are the Census Bureau partnerships, employees, and they can do lots of things with your agency, especially if you're going to have an agency-wide party or some kind of a meeting or a gathering. It's a great idea to invite them to come speak and to train at your agencies. We also have within the coalition members from Census Counts lists of people, state leads and hubs. You can go see what our Census Counts 2020 partners are doing in your state, possibly in your location, by clicking the link at the bottom of this page. All right, so this comes to my job. We have a small team. Lauren is a program associate who works on the census team part-time. Lil Dupree also works on the census stuff part-time. I am full-time, and our job was for 6 months to increase awareness and educate folks on what was happening and how things were going to play out, and mobilize everybody to take action. We have also been curating resources. We have a couple of toolkits up on our website. We have lots of fact sheets and flyers and postcards that are all posted that you can download and print. We are also sending buttons, flyers, pamphlets, postcards to agencies that request them. So we got a little bit more money this year, and we knew that people needed those materials. So we'll have email addresses at the end, but if you need buttons or handouts, fact sheets, postcards for kids, we're going to have a flyer with a coloring page on one side and a fact sheet for parents on the other side to hand out to Head Start kids or kids that come into your waiting room. if you need those materials, you can shoot us an email and we'll work through what you need and what we can send to you. We've been trying to equip all of our agencies to do census work in between other things you're doing. And part of that is handing somebody a flyer and saying, hey, the census is important, read this fact sheet, and please make sure you check your mailbox for your invitation. We also have a 10-member working group made up of people from the 9 hardest to count, highest populations of hardest to count members across the country. They are our advisory board, and they've been helping us spearhead some of our efforts. A lot of these materials can be found here at the communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020 website. We have also created our own complete count committee. I'm nerdy. I really love the complete count committee, not only because it reminds me of a tripartite board, but because it's a really great way for us to have a cohesive group of people who are working towards the census. If your agency has not nominated someone yet, and about half of you have not, we really encourage you to ask your ED, or if you are the ED, to elect a point person to receive our emails and to be a part of our complete count committee. The community action members get, we're doing weekly webinars, so we'll do a webinar right before the March 12th. I'm sorry, they're not weekly, but they're staged with each section, each phase of the census. So we'll have one right before the March 12th drop, so people know what's happening, that the online is open, the hotlines are open, people will find the invitations in their mailbox, and to encourage folks to do stuff like plan for April 1st, everyone to wear red, and the buttons that we send that say, ask me about the census, or whatever little things they can do to help promote census on some key dates. We would really encourage all of you to join that, because that makes sure that your agency is informed and knows what's happening with the census. We also have a census track up on our Moodle Academy. If you have a prior Moodle account through Community Action, you can go find it right now. We have other courses through our Learning Communities track, and it's an online learning platform where you can go and do all of our tracks at your own pace. The census track itself takes about 2 hours and gives you basic information and background, so you can answer questions the customers might have for you about the census and make them feel more comfortable with filling it out. And it can all be found at moodle.communityactionpartnership.com. So the materials that I mentioned, the posters, the buttons, one-pager, fact sheet, all of this stuff is meant to be integrated into your current work. If you have time to throw a census party, great, that's fantastic. But we know you guys are all really busy, and that's really, really difficult. So we're asking for you to slip it in the middle of your other work. You finish filling out a TANF form with somebody, you hand them a one-page flyer that has the census basics on the front and the hotline numbers and the URL on the back. And you say, make sure you fill out your census forms. It's really important to make sure we have federal funding for our agency, and make it easy for them to do. That's really what we're hoping that you can do. If there is some material that you need that we haven't created yet, chances are pretty good that someone else will need it. So please do ask us to create things for you. We will definitely make downloadable things for you. And if we run out of printed materials and we do another printing run, we're happy to print more things. And if one of you needs something, we can create it and print it and send it out as well. All right, what else can you do? The messaging is key, and that's what the point of today's webinar is. Checking time. I think we're doing okay. So when you incorporate some of this messaging into existing contacts with clients and customers, we're hoping that you'll find a way to touch each person 7 times. And that's not entirely on community action. That's also by going to the doctor. It's by talking to teachers. It's through a poster at your local grocery store. So it's a community-wide effort. But the 7 touches is a marketing principle. There was a really unusual ad on the Super Bowl with Jason Momoa, the guy who plays Aquaman. I have no idea what that commercial is about. I just know that he takes off his arm and he takes off his leg and and underneath he's a really skinny, scrawny guy. It takes 7 viewings of a commercial for you to know it back to front. And that's case in point. I've seen it once. I don't really know what it's about. So that's what we're going for here, those marketing principles that show in market research that you need to see something or hear a message 7 times for it to soak in. And as staff members, for people who come to us in their hour of need, we are those trusted messengers and service providers, which is why if we tell somebody something 7 times, it'll sink in for them. Those 7 touches can be a flyer in a food pantry grocery bag. It can be a poster in the front hall. It can be a transportation driver that hands a postcard to every person they give a ride to. It can be staff wearing red on Census Day and wearing their buttons. Any of those things can be part of those touches to help reinforce that the census is important. We also have these training tools. So the upper left-hand corner is a 7-minute video that answers frequently asked questions about the census. It's a great primer. If you and your teams have nothing else to do bandwidth-wise but watch this 7-minute video, it's a really great overview. We also have, and I think they're going up on the website today if they haven't already, 8 or 9 other shorter snippet videos that you can put on social media. You can play them on your CCTV in your waiting room. You can put them on a TV if you have a TV in your waiting room. Lots of different ways that you can move these around and help people understand some of the basics about this and dispel some of the fear around the census. Okay, these are a few prompts if you want to do a staff meeting to think through. If you've got somebody who's afraid to fill out the census, you might want to talk about the safety features of the census. The census actually has 3 main key factors that keep things safe. The first is Title 13, where all staff members of the Census Bureau pledge an oath to something called Title 13. It states that if you leak private information or share personal information from anybody you've come in contact with as a Census Bureau employee, you can be fined for $250,000 and you can be jailed for up to 5 years, which is a pretty powerful protection in place. The forms that we fill out this year will not be available to public viewing until the year 2092. So if any of you are genealogy researchers, the next release of Census Bureau information will be in 2022, and it is the census forms will be released from 1950. And if you think about it, that's another really powerful protection, because if you have a family member staying with you who shouldn't really be there, maybe you have a Section 8 housing voucher and you're allowed to have 4 people in your house and you have this 5th person, you might be afraid to fill out that form because you don't want to lose your housing, which is perfectly reasonable, except that the Census Bureau keeps all of that information private until 2092. And if you think about it, in 1950, most landlords that were around in 1950 are deceased now. So there's no way you could get in trouble in 2092 for something that you did today. So those are a couple of the things that they have in place to make sure that personal private information is kept confidential. The Census Bureau is actually barred by law from releasing any of that information. So they take information in from other bureaus. They get information from the IRS and from HUD and from HHS to verify their information, but they can't send information out. So no ICE, Homeland Security, no law enforcement office will be receiving any of that information. If people don't think that the census impacts their community, you can tell them about the $2,000 per person in federal funding that comes to each area from each person counted. If somebody struggles with forms and they're going to have difficulty filling out the census, you can help them fill that form out. You can do it with them, just like you would any other form. If you know that somebody will never fill out the census form, but you have their information in your system, you cannot go online and fill the form out for them like that. But you can help anybody that asks you for help. And if somebody doesn't have good internet or mail service, you can push them to call the phone. The phone lines it would be the best way for them to respond to the census. Okay, let's get into some of the messaging meat. Why are kids undercounted? I mentioned before, kids 0 to 4 and 5 to 9 are two of the largest undercounted groups in the country. Often parents don't understand how the data is used, and they don't understand that school funding, for example, comes from census data. Often they think the government already has data, which is true. In a lot of cases, the government does know. But if we don't fill out the forms, it doesn't matter. So it's kind of like if you take a nationwide poll for president for the election and you used those results for your election results, people would be upset because the process is you go vote. So it's kind of the same concept. Like even if you have an idea of who should win based on a nationwide poll, you still have to go vote in order to have your vote count and for a real result. And so it's the same thing here. You have to fill out the form for it to count. Some people have privacy concerns, which is legit unless you know the protections that the Census Bureau has put in place. So you cut through a lot of this. Oh, I'm sorry, in a complex household, that accounts for 80% of households that are missed, or I'm sorry, 80% of children in households. So that's the grandmother and the granddaughter relationship, or that's the extra kid that you're taking care of because they got kicked out of their house or what have you. Infants, babies, people forget about their babies. They might put their 4-year-old, but they think that the baby doesn't matter on the form, and it very much does. So messaging that works is by telling people that census information is used for funding decisions and funding formulas, and the effects last for a decade, so it can be most of a baby's childhood, if not all of that kid's childhood, right? If you have an 8-year-old that you miss, the next census will be when they're 18, and then they're technically an adult, and they miss out on all the programs and all the services that the federal government funds for children. So counting children means more funding for schools. Great message. 82% moved from not wanting to fill out the form to filling out the form. Help the government plan for the future. 82% that moved as well from not filling out the form and including children to including children. And again, if you miss that 2-year-old, your community loses funding for the next 10 years, which is their childhood, moves 81%. African American communities, another highly undercounted population. Black adults age 35 and older generally will fill out the census. So with African American communities, we're targeting millennials. And they are the least likely to recognize how important the census is and participate. To convert them into people who are willing to participate, you talk about the impact that the census has on their community. That is a very, very powerful message. And being specific about that impact moves them from not wanting to participate and not feeling like it's important to feeling like it is important. And if you can mention the impact on Medicaid and food stamps, they're more likely to move into the category of completing the census. $20,000 per person in funding over 10 years. It makes a big difference. That funding coming into your community pays for lots of things that all residents use and participate and benefit from. The government has other ways to obtain this information, but if you do not fill out the census form, it does not count. And telling people that it's only 10 questions. I was talking to somebody at the conference earlier today who thought that there was a long form and a short form. It is 10 questions. And as soon as you tell them that it's about 10 minutes, you could even say it's 10 minutes for 10 years, it makes them more likely to fill it out. Ensuring funding programs in my community is the most persuasive message across generations. Hispanic communities. The citizenship question I mentioned before is one of several things that will not be on the census, along with bank account numbers and political preferences and social security numbers. None of those things are on there. Addressing that head on with Hispanic communities has been, we figured out that that's really important, very crucial. Talking about the confidentiality statements and the penalties for confidentiality breaches also helps move people. Hispanic communities would prefer to fill the form out on paper. So that April 8th point where people start to get paper forms is really crucial. Any message is better than none. So talking to any of our Latinx communities about the census really helps push that, push the participation rate up. Talking about being safe, convenient, and required, talking about 10 questions, all again. And again, we're going to send these out so you can read these slides in more depth. Also in Hispanic communities, talking to women is really important because the women run that part of the household culturally for the most part. So talking about how it's a civic and community duty, talking about resistance, which is saying they don't want us to count, so we have to be counted, is a good message. Talking with trusted messengers, so if you can get somebody who comes in who's a matriarch in a community on board and to talk about the census, that's really helpful because hearing it from your friends and family really makes a big difference. I think I covered all of this, so for time I'm going to move, but we will send these out. Asian Americans, 2/3 say they're likely to participate. The best message here is the census helps your community get its fair share of resources and government services. This has a whole list of different reasons and how important and how well they scored on this survey. Asian Americans, again, communities get resources. Census data is critical to our children's future and the next generation. Fair share of resources. Again, all of these things are a little redundant but slightly different for each group. Native American communities have no reason to trust the American government whatsoever. So what's really interesting here is that the civic duty message was very compelling, but legally required by the Constitution was not. So that slight difference in the framing of the same idea really made a big difference. By participating, we speak for the generation of Native people before us and those yet to come. The idea of erasure was really important in Native American communities. You don't want people, you don't want the Native American communities and Alaska Native communities to be invisible. We need to be counted because we need to be here. And we need to show that we are here and not erased, was also really interesting. It helps our Native communities be seen, be visible. Everything is confidential. Native American tribes need this federal funding badly. And so an undercount in the tribal communities really, really impacts them negatively. And it's really important to make sure that they are participating. We have handout sheets that you can download. You can also order some from us with individual messaging, frequently asked questions. So one of the things you can do with your staff is to hand those sheets out and talk through some of the answers to make sure people are comfortable with the messaging. And it's stuff like this. Do I participate if I'm not a citizen? Yes, yes you do. Do they come to my house? They might, but they're less likely to if you fill that survey out early and completely. Census Bureau employees will certainly come to your house if you do not fill out the census. They might come by if they have a question on a form or if they want to quality assurance check. They might come by and ask you some follow-up questions. But the best way for someone to not come to your door is for you to fill out that census form as soon as you can and completely. Is it safe? First of all, yes, under law, census data can only be used for statistics. The 72 years and the Census Bureau staff Title 13 oath, all of those things combined make the census very safe. Can I help someone fill out their form? Yes, we are professional form fillers in a lot of ways. You can certainly do that, especially if somebody has disabilities or they can't see or they can't read so well. You can certainly assist them with that. You can also dial the phone for them to fill out the form on the phone with somebody. You can also pull up the URL and have them sit at a computer. If you can put a computer in your front office, that would be amazing, or even a phone line where people can sit while they're waiting for people and fill out the census on the phone. While they're waiting, that would be an amazing effort to help get people counted as well. Accessibility issues, you can ask your Census Bureau partnership specialist for materials in Braille. They also have interpreters, sign language interpreters, so you can fill it out in that language. I don't think that's one of the 13 languages, but they do have that. Okay, So you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is CA Partnership. We will sign you up automatically because you attended our briefing today for Census newsletters. You can also join our Census Engagement Facebook group by going to the National Community Action Partnership Facebook group, and it's the only group. So it's on the National Community Action Partnership Facebook page has one group, and that's us. You can join where people are asking questions, putting ideas up, asking detailed information, and just discussing the census as a whole. So we have action steps. We need somebody nominated for the CACCC. We want you to find your partnership specialist with the Census Bureau. Look for those complete count committees to see who you can join with in your community. Recruit to fill those census jobs. We can create a census plan of action. If you want to talk with me one-on-one, there's a calendar invite system where you can find 15 to 30 minutes to talk to me about what your agency is or can do, and create that census plan of action. And we're hoping that you will spread the word among people in your office about the census and how important it is for us to talk about it with our customers. Oh, I've talked for a lot. Lauren, do we have any questions? No, okay, she's crossed the room for me. She says there are no questions. You can, there's resources, you can find those. You can reach out to any of us and you can ask questions if you did not get a chance during this web briefing. Shoot us an email, ask us your questions, or if you want to schedule a one-on-one with me, we can send you the link. If you would like buttons or flyers or pamphlets, anything like that, you can email me and or Lauren, and we can get those out to you. Wow, I'm right under the line. We're going to stay on for a few more minutes, and if you have some questions,